So I'm slowly trying to get out some of the information that came out from the Davos gathering by the World Economic Forum recently, so last week. I'm doing this through interviews, through my own show, but I want to do a little bit on here quickly. And I wanted to talk very briefly about tokenization. So I don't know if everybody watched, there was a board, a panel put together to talk on the coming tokenization. Now, first off, what is tokenization? Now, I've talked about this before. Its roots and the terminology seem to come right out of the Bank of International Settlements. Now, the Bank of International Settlements is a nefarious bank above the law. It is the central bank for central bankers. And it dates back to the rise of certainly the Nazi regime in terms of their support and their aid. That was countered in rhetoric by Norway, saying that they wanted to disband the Bank of International Settlements at the time because the Bank of International Settlements certainly financed or seemed to facilitate World War II. All that to be said, what is tokenization? Well, tokenization is that everything is basically an asset. So it's an asset that can be traded upon, that all of us could maybe buy a little bit of the Shard in London, or you could have the private assets of your car, of even you, because the Bank of International Settlements calls you a soul bound token, and that everything, absolutely everything, would be on a world ledger. Now, what is this? This is the abundance of trade. Ezekiel 28, verse 16, in the description of Hasatan, the Satan, it says, and when he was found originally in the garden, and he was there for purpose, Lucifer was there for purpose in the garden, initially, I believe, as a guardian cherub. However, it says that an abundance of trade was found in his heart. And this is now, under tokenization, creating a world, a new world order of and situated upon an abundance of trade. So it goes further than this, because the idea of this is all centered around two different descriptions. One, central bank digital currency, and two, stable coin. Now, people will think, well, and I've heard people say this, the Trump administration is the counter to the World Economic Forum. Well, no, it's not. It's on board. In fact, the Trump family have vowed that they will put basically Trump assets on the blockchain in 2026. So it's that everything can be, you can trade on this and trade on that and trade on you, but everything by definition of this will be programmable. A stable coin, programmable. A central bank digital currency, programmable. The individual from the French government was speaking, and he says that France has put innovative finance on the government mandate for 2026. In terms of tokenization, he says tokenization of the world is for the better. He argued that tokenization fights back against privatization in favor of dispersal of equity. Now, what all of that means is he's saying, well, you've got these multi billionaires over here, and what this allows, they own so much, and this allows everybody else to own a little bit. But when you break it down, it's not ownership. It's not ownership, it's investment, but you own nothing. So he goes on to say that from the Pontes project, that France, or Europe, will this year pilot the first wholesale project central bank digital currency. He says this will be the first rolled out in terms of its nature this year. He says then the API project will supply the European ledger. So the Pontes project and the API project supply a ledger that everything is on, whether it's private or public in terms of asset, and these all become tradable. But when you look at this, at its very core, tradable is not the word that I would associate with this. I associate programmable. If we look at the Chinese system, again, their central bank digital currency is programmable and associated so heavily and connected into the Chinese social credit system. Last week, we heard that Vietnam are going from their central bank digital currency into their social credit system. This is what all of this is about. It is programmable, and the same in terms of you. If you're a soul-bound token, you're programmable. Now, they can't change your mind, but what they can is they can restrict your services. They can restrict your operation. They can restrict your ability to move and to disperse across the place. They can restrict you because you will be an asset that effectively you're not an autonomous, independent, free human being under the tokenized ledger. You're an asset. So all of this, right? Let's go through a few other things said. So the French, there was two French individuals on this panel, but one of them said that we still need a two-tier monetary system. One for public central bank money, which is the anchor, and then the other for privatized tokenized currency. This got my ears tingling. Why? Because you have these two sections already in terms of the think tanks or the groups that want to bring this into being. You have the public sector, which should be public, but it's more private than public, the Bank of International Settlements, that wants to bring in the CBDC tokenized system across the world. But then for private tokenization, you have BlackRock that also say the same thing, singing off the same hymn sheet. Now, Larry Fink of BlackRock, the interim chairman of the World Economic Forum, has came out and said that in terms of the implementation of social qualities into their business structure, aka environmental social governance, it needs to be forced on the workers. It needs to be forced on the companies. Now, under tokenization, that forcing will be there. And what that basically means, right? Put it, if we're a private asset, right? So if I'm a soul-bound token, but I'm a private asset or a public asset, either way, right? Then I will effectively be subservient to the dictate from the government, whether it's an ESG regulation, whether it's a case of, well, Gary, you've went over your carbon score. Now, already in the UK, if you buy a sandwich in a packet, you'll get a carbon score on the packet. They're prepping, preparing, and priming us for all of this. So, it says here tokenization falls into their equity idea. It's the idea that it's not just a few, but it's nonsense. It's basically a globalized form of communism, if you break it down, where it's control, and it's controlled by the few over the many. I want to just read a few more things, if you don't mind. They go on to say most transactions will be tokenized within the next 5 years. Tokenization, so that means, let's take that word and just say programmable, right? Tokenization or programmable or programmability will be heavily regulated. They need it heavily regulated because you've got a private sector and a public sector, and because the two have to merge together, they need to have heavy regulations. Now, what are those heavy regulations? A state of goals. I wonder what they'll be. Maybe it's diversity, equity, index goals and ESG goals, all summed up with the 2030 agenda. But they say this allows the masses to invest. Money has always been, according to these individuals on the panel, a private-public partnership. BlackRock and Bank of International Settlements. The French speaker went on to say, I trust central bank digital currencies run by the government more than stablecoin or central bank digital currencies run by a private infrastructure. Now, he's talking about that in terms of Bitcoin. Now, praise God, someone on the panel corrected him and said, Bitcoin has no owners. It is not a regulatory system. But he was saying basically the central bank digital currency, that's the framework in which we've all got to trust. And 2026 is the rollout of their pilot across Europe. And it seems like every nation is onto this in some way, shape, or form. We know that Trump himself and those around him have been creating these systems, these crypto systems in place. Palantir have created, or sorry, Peter Thiel of Palantir and Alex Karp have created Eber, based off the mountain in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and it's a stable coin framework. Again, programmable, surveillable, tokenization, reducing everybody down to a world ledger. Now, the world ledger is the Bank of International Settlements. In Europe, you have the Pontes project, which is a European ledger, and they need to operate between Europe and the rest of the world and the rest of Europe, right? How do they do that? A uniform set of goals. Reduce your carbon footprint. Otherwise, you're a bad investment as an asset. Be subservient to the government dictate. Adhere to DEI. All of this to control and surveil and stop. That's my opinion. Now, they're trying to make this, I'll finish with this, they're trying to make this amenable and, I guess, appealing to the populace. China, and they talked about China's model on this. China this year are now allowing interest on your central bank digital currency so that you'll get dividends, you'll get interest on what you've, accumulated. But how do you accumulate this? By being a good citizen, by being a citizen according to their rules. Welcome to Dystopia.